thank you for joining me. Today I've got with me Richard Rodway. He's a family partner at the Head Partnership Solicitors that have offices in Henley and Reading. Obviously, lockdown has been occurring for most of us for 7 weeks and maybe continuing for a few weeks going forth. However, one thing that has come out of that in regards to family law is the online divorce process, which the Head Partnership were part of the initial pilot scheme, that is enabling people to actually process things, even though we are all pretty much contained at home and can't be physically in court because of social distancing. Richard, do you want to tell me a little bit more about if you want to go and have an online divorce, what the criteria are and how it works?
Yeah, sure, Melissa, thank you. So in essence, in dealing with divorce proceedings generally, if you've been married for a year, that's the first requirement, then you can petition for divorce if you can establish that the marriage has irretrievably broken down. To establish that the marriage has irretrievably broken down, you have to establish that the unreasonable behaviour of your spouse. A common misconception is that the ground of unreasonable behaviour has to be the other person's unreasonable behaviour. You can't divorce on the basis of your own unreasonable behaviour. Or on the other party's adultery. 2 years separation with consent, consent being an important one, you do need the other party's consent. Desertion, the other party has deserted you and they need to have deserted you for 2 years, or 5 years separation. Now, in terms of the grounds for divorce, unless you've been separated for 2 years, you have to commence divorce proceedings on the basis of unreasonable behaviour or adultery. Realistically, with adultery, you do need the other person's admission as to adultery, and quite often it's fairly established, that between a couple that one party might be in another relationship or whatever, but unless they will admit to it and formally admit to it within the context of proceedings, realistically, you're not going to be able to progress proceedings on that basis, because it's quite difficult, say for in certain situations, to prove adultery without the other person's admission. So realistically, therefore, a lot of people find themselves commencing proceedings on the basis of unreasonable behaviour. And whilst unreasonable behaviour sounds quite grandiose, the reality is you don't. The threshold is relatively limited. If you have a brainstorm as to why it is you feel that the relationship's irretrievably broken down, then normally there are some themes from that one can build an unreasonable behaviour petition around, and it's unlikely that the other party is going to defend the petition, or they might be unhappy with the particulars relied upon, but particularly if this is a joint decision to move forward, then you can make that a joint venture anyway and agree the particulars of behaviour that you're going to rely on. And particularly if you're in agreement, one doesn't have to say an awful lot. So if you can tick those boxes, so to speak, and the reality is people generally can, then you can petition for divorce. Now, historically, lawyers would send petitions off to court in paper form in the post, and the court would then stamp the papers, send papers on to the respondent party for them to attend to. Now, of course, in a world now where courts are operating on reduced service, that's a bit more protracted and a bit more problematic than it was 6 weeks ago. Mercifully, we are signed up to be able to progress online divorces ourselves at the Head Partnership. And what we're finding is that's really coming into its own during the lockdown, because whereas the court isn't progressing paper applications at the moment particularly quickly, where we have made a divorce petition online, and that's effectively filling in the form online rather than a form that goes off in the post, that's being turned around by the court within 48 hours, and papers are then being sent online to the other party. One of the peculiarities of that we found so far is that it's important for, even if the other person has their own solicitors, it appears to be the case that it's sensible for only the respondent party to have their details on the divorce papers. They might show them to us or whatever, because it's not something that you can have a respondent divorce lawyer on the other side in relation to the divorce. So we're already learning from that experience, and we're conscious that not every lawyer at the moment is able to provide that service. So it's really enabling us to help people through divorces at the moment far more effectively than would otherwise be the case.
So that's great from the point of view that it's swift, it's circumventing all the issues that unfortunately lockdown and social distancing is causing. But whilst you can get an online divorce, it doesn't actually deal with the financial aspects, does it?
Yeah, no, that's right. I mean, yes, whilst I think that confuses some people sometimes, because at the back of the divorce petition, it does ask you some questions about whether you want, and it cites the sort of financial relief that one would typically deal with as part of a financial application. But actually, if you commence divorce proceedings and jump through the procedural hoops of divorce proceedings, well, that's what you get. You get a divorce. In itself, it doesn't deal with financial matters. And so, therefore, again, alongside dealing with the divorce, one needs to be talking about negotiating about finances, or, God forbid, if one can't reach an agreement over finances, triggering financial court proceedings in their own right, so that, you know, ultimately there's a conclusion to those financial negotiations or proceedings, and then one can invite the court to make an order enshrining the terms of those settlements to make sure that the agreement binds, is enforceable, and is generally worth the paper it's written on. So yeah, absolutely, going through a divorce itself just gets you divorced. It's important to recognise that we still need to, independently of that, invite the court to make an order in relation to finances.
So it's wonderful that online divorce system has come into its own in these terrible times, but be aware there are, you need to be aware of your circumstances. You really do need to get some legal advice, and you do need to be aware of its limitations as well.
Completely.
Right. Thank you for joining us today, Richard.
Pleasure. Thank you.